Thanks, Bill. I want to add my welcome to each of you for this, the third lecture of our 2022-2023 McFaddin-Ward House lecture series. And as always, I want to acknowledge the Naming McFaddin-Ward Heritage Foundation and the museum's board of directors, whose generosity ensures that all programming here at the museum is free and open to the public. I want to take a few minutes this evening to remember our board of directors, President Emeritus Rosine McFaddin-Wilson, who passed away Tuesday night. Rosine served as president of the board of directors of the McFaddin-Ward House from its inception shortly after Mamie McFaddin-Ward's death in 1982 until 2015. She spearheaded efforts to turn the home into a museum and encouraged her aunt in preserving her home for the people of Beaumont. A fifth-generation Texan, Rosine was long interested in historical preservation and history. A founding member of the Beaumont Heritage Society, she was instrumental in the Society's first project, the restoration of the John J. French Historic House Museum. She also served as vice chairman of the Texas Historical Commission. For over 30 years, Rosine was actively involved in making this museum the standout that it is today and was nationally acclaimed for her accomplishments. Simply put, without Rosine's leadership and dedication, this museum and its contributions to our region would not exist. Tonight, you'll learn about some of America's finest master artists who practice some of the world's oldest artistic traditions which are profoundly different. They are rooted in cultures that span the globe and practiced in communities that span our nation. It was my honor to serve 2 tours of duty at the National Endowment for the Arts, the nation's cultural agency. As the deputy chairman, I was not really supposed to be partial to any particular projects or grant categories because I oversaw all 13 of the disciplines and their grants. That said, there was one discipline, the folk and traditional arts, and one program, the National Heritage Fellowships, that was worth breaking the partiality rule for. The National Heritage Fellowships are the nation's highest honor awarded to a folk or traditional artist. I had the pleasure of working with Bergey, who was the director of the NEA's Folk and Traditional Arts prior to his retirement in 2014 after 30 years at the Arts Endowment. He shepherded the Heritage Fellowships to national prominence, along with nationally acclaimed photographer Tom Pich, who worked with Bergey over these years to capture the unique essence of these Heritage Fellows by traveling throughout our nation, capturing images of these exceptional artists in their homes and in their studios. Since 1982, the nation has recognized these artists annually, whose work reflects the fluidity of past, present, and future. And while only a handful of these honorees hail from Texas, one is a native of Beaumont, nationally recognized blues artist and recording star Barbara Lynn. Her song, You'll Lose a Good Thing, soared to the top of the pop charts in the 1960s. Barbara was named a National Heritage Fellow in 2018, and we're honored to have her with us this evening and to again celebrate her designation as a Heritage Fellow. Barbara, would you like to... I asked Barbara to wear her medal, which she did, and why don't you stand up and show it everybody? Would you like to say a few words?
Yes.
Good evening, each and every one of you. First of all, I am so honored to be here, and when Mr. Tom called me and asked me would I come down since I'm one of the, I tell him, well, okay. I say, I'm 80 years old now, and I don't get around too much, anymore, and he told me where it was going to be, but I just like to say thank you all, and all of the many people I've met during my life of being a recording artist, and I've traveled so many places too. I've been on American Bandstand not once but twice, and I'm so honored to finally see Dick Hart Blue. Boy, that was an honor. And then I played with some of the greats, you know, from Stevie Wonder, B.B. King. Oh my God, a lot of people. We went on tour together. And of course, my mother traveled with me when I first started because my dad told her, I think you better travel with Barbara. She's got a #2 record up there in the charts, and she's kind of maybe green behind the ears. So my mother stopped working to travel with me. And I mean, she went with me in many places, and she made sure nobody, no man or no woman tried to give her daughter no cigarette drugs. Until today, I'm 80 years old, and I just thank God I don't drink, I don't smoke, never did drugs, nothing like that. I got what God gave me, you know, natural talent. And I get on that stage and play my left-hand guitar, and I mean, hey, you know, the house went down. I just thank God for all my blessings, everything He, you know, bestowed on me, you know, and I just can't forget Him, no way. But now, as it stands today, that my daughter's sitting right there, she will tell you, Mama's scared of flying now. I do not fly anymore. Has to be by car or somewhere, you know. But anyway, thank you all. Thank you so much.
You didn't bring your guitar, did you?
We're really honored to have Barbara Lynn with us tonight, so thank you so much for coming. Through music, story, and craft, the National Heritage Fellows such as Barbara Lynn weave together the story of this country, its creativity, its energy, its brilliant depth of beauty. To witness the diversity of our nation brought to life through the arts is nothing short of magical. It serves as a reminder of the power the arts have to bridge our differences and to connect us as neighbors, as humans, and as Americans. I want to share with you a short video of a 2021 National Heritage Fellow, Joni Madden from Yonkers, New York, who I had the pleasure of meeting in 2019 at the Susquehanna Folk Music Festival in Pennsylvania. This clip will give you a glimpse into her personality, but more importantly, into the gratitude every National Heritage Fellow holds for those that came before them, teaching and sharing the traditions they now carry on.
Mary's dad and my dad, they were great buddies. Her father was a great accordion player as well. And I remember when we would do concerts, they would all be at the back of the hall, all the dads lined up. And after each tune, you'd see them all going like this. You know, we used to be more worried about what our fathers were going to teach out instead of the New York Times. You ready? My parents came to watch me play with the Boston Pops up at Tanglewood. I looked down, and I was playing a solo with the 100-piece orchestra, and my father was crying. You know, he said, Jesus, you did it. You did everything you said you were going to do. And he'd be so proud to see me today. Anybody who says they got it from the wind, they're full of it. You've got it from all these people who have given their hearts, their souls, passing the music down and giving their time. It's music from birds and the bees, and there's something in it that touches people.
Now, to tell us more about this magic, please welcome Tom Pich and Bergey.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for coming out to hear our little presentation. We probably should talk just a little bit about the image on the book first, and we'll come back around to how Tom got started. But with the National Heritage Fellows, Tony mentioned it's the highest honor that's given to folk and traditional artists in this country. And it was hard to select, number one, the images we would use for the book, and also what to put on the cover. And Tom, how many artists have you photographed now? I was going to say shot, but that probably would be a good term. How many have you photographed?
260.
260. So we have 260 photographs to think about when we were trying to imagine what would make a good cover. And we selected this particular photo for a reason, and that is that we think of our National Heritage Fellows as national living treasures. And this photograph was taken in Yosemite Park. And we sort of wanted to connect that idea of our wonderful national parks and their national treasures and these living treasures. There's an African proverb that when an elder dies, it's like a library burning down. And that's what we wanted to honor with the National Heritage Fellowships, is those people who have contributed significantly to our culture in one way or another. So we thought that was an appropriate image for the cover of the book, because all these are indeed truly masters of their art, their craft. And Tom, maybe you'd want to say a little bit about this photo, because it is a very special photo in some other ways also.
Yes. So on a cloudy and rainy day, I took an early morning walk with Julia Parker. And as we walked through the woods, she would touch a tree and tell me she was part of that tree, as she was part of the water coming off over the mountain, as part of the earth and the animals that roam the earth. This photograph was taken about 5 hours after we had first met. So my camera didn't come out right away. I want to learn more about that person. I asked every fellow, and I asked Julia that day, tell me where you would like to be, have your portrait taken. And she said her favorite meadow. And she directed me to this meadow. It was raining, there was some hail in the photo. The water was running down the road, pulled over, walked into the field, set up the tripod, the camera, and then went and brought Julia over. As I started taking photos of her, our voices just talking, all of a sudden the deer just rose up out of the grass. I had never known they were there. And at that one moment, everything she had told me earlier that day happened in one image. And once that happened, we knew we had the photograph. And that's how just about every one of my visits starts and ends with something magical happening. And it's really, the magic is the person.
She's a wonderful basket maker. She's holding a small basket there. And the materials that she uses for that basket were gathered in that meadow. And that's one reason she wanted to go back there and have her photograph taken there, because that is the source of the materials that she uses in her basket. You might want to point it that way.
Oh.
See if that works. Well, is it turned on? There's a little gizmo there. We're supposed to make the photos move with, but maybe not.
folks in the back room.
There we go.
Okay, I think that came from. So, this is where this all started. I picked up this magazine in my apartment in New York City in January '91. As we all do in geographic, we look at the pictures, read it.
Yes.
I came upon this article about National Heritage Fellows. And from that moment on, I said to myself, honestly, this is what I want to do photographically. So, without spending any more time, I went to the phone and I dialed the operator to put me through to National Geographic. And the person there put me through to the senior writer of that article. And after a wonderful conversation, he said, well, we just wrote the article and published it, but you have to go and contact somebody at the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA. Well, I had no idea about the institution. So hung up, and I immediately dialed 0 again, and I called the operator and says, can you put me through to the NEA? And she said, sure enough. The phone picked up. Hello? I said, I'd like to speak to somebody about this article that was written. And the woman at the other end said, well, this is the NRA. You don't write that. So I hung up on her. And I dialed 0 again. And I said to the operator, can you put me through to the National Endowment for the Arts? And this wouldn't happen today because the phone rang and this young lady, Rose Morgan, picked up the phone. Now, I don't remember my conversation with her, but somehow she invited me that the next time I'm in Washington, D.C., here's our address and here's my room number. Come on in and visit with us. That night, I packed my bag and see the next day. Knocked on that door. Rose Morgan answered the door. Told her who I was, and she said, welcome, and walked me 10 feet down the hallway and introduced me to the director at the time, Dan Sheehy. And this has been my life since. And I've been blessed for it.
I'll look for you.
Okay, we'll give you a cue. This is just a little bit of a montage of the National Heritage Fellows events that occur, because there is a cash award. It started out at $5,000. I think it's up to $25,000 now. And probably one of the best weeks of my year at the NEA was the week that I got to call the National Heritage Fellows and tell them they'd received the award. When we called Johnny Gimbel, he's a Texas swing fiddler from Dripping Springs, Texas. I believe the award then was $10,000. Told him he got the National Heritage Fellowship for $10,000. There was a long silence. And then he said, I just want to know one thing. Do I have to pay it back all at one time, or can I pay back in installments? He had quite a sense of humor. I think he was putting us on there. But there are different elements of the National Heritage Fellowships. One is the personal, one is the political, and one is the public. And usually when the fellows come to town, and in most cases they've never met one another before, they get together on the first evening they arrive, and by the end of that evening they're like family. It's like a very special group of people who get together. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 days, there are several events. One is a ceremony on Capitol Hill. That's sort of the political event where congressmen and senators often come, and present the award to the fellows, the wonderful medallion that you see now. Earlier on, it was actually just it was a certificate. And then we always have a banquet at the Library of Congress, the Great Hall of the Library of Congress. And that's a chance for the fellows. That's the personal end of things where they get to speak with one another, spend time together, and visit. And that's a really important element of it as well. And then we have a concert, a public presentation that presents all of the National Heritage Fellows. Way back, Charles Carroll used to MC it way back. He did it for 4 years. It was a wonderful event when he did it. We've had great MCs since. If you look on this one photo over here on the far left, you can see projected on the screen, that's the concert, and the fellows are projected on the screen. That little person down in the lower left is Tony Chabot. And they're presenting them. And here you see some of the fellows in concert, and you see the banquet at the Great Hall and the medallions. I believe we can move on.
Yep. So when I started this journey, I didn't have the concept all rounded out. So this is the first photo I ever took of this gentleman, and what I thought that it should be photographically in large format and black and white. And I photographed Mr. Sims in Harlem, where I lived close to. Went home that night into my darkroom. As soon as I seen the film, I knew that it had to be a different format and had to be in color. So that one day changed the direction of how I photographed ever since. But this is the only photograph, and I love it to death because it's the only black and white one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really special.
And he got a little board, the way it looks like, and put it out on the street there. And some of the kids in the neighborhood came out, and he did a little a soft shoe.
I was sitting in his apartment with him, and he said, why don't we go down to the street? And on the side of his chair, he had this board, and he just picked it up and came down and put it down, and the kids in the neighborhood knew, and they just joined in. It's a really special day.
Sandman was known for doing the Sandman's dance. He kind of originated that idea of putting sand down on the board or on the floor, and he would scratch his feet as part of his tap dance, and it gave it a little bit of a different sound effect for his dancing. So that's why he was known as Sandman Sims.
So after that, my first journey down to visit my first Heritage Fellows was down south, and this is Philip Simmons, and it was a great way to start to form a vision of what it would be like in the future. He was very accommodating, and there was a point where I went to his home and knocked on the door, and this young man, about 12 years old, answered the door. I asked for Mr. Simmons, and he said, "Hold on a second," closed the door and disappeared. And I waited at that door for quite a while, and nobody came back out. I walked up the driveway, met my dear friend Michael, who we've been traveling with for years, and I said, "I don't know what happened." I told him the story, and with that, I seen a young man that I just spoke to run across the intersection about a block away. I says, that's the kid I just spoke to. A few minutes later, the same kid with an older teenager ran the other way. We have no idea what's going on. I walked back to the house, knocked on the door again, and there the two of them were. It was a chain of command of asking the oldest brother, can this gentleman want to see your grandfather? And we went in, and then Mr. Simmons took us to his barn, and lit up this fire, and this was one of the first photographs. It was the second photograph ever done in color. And I never shot a lot. These were always done on film, so we had to go on our instinct. There might have been 15, 20 photographs taken in its entirety. We'd never seen them until we got home.
Not unlike New Orleans, Charleston, South Carolina has a lot of ornamental ironwork, and much of the ironwork was done by very skilled, in many cases, formerly enslaved people, passed down through the generations, and Philip Simmons was one of those who, most of the ironwork you see today in Charleston was created by Philip Simmons. And the medal, the medallion that Barbara's wearing and that you see on the cover is actually an image that's taken from one of Mr. Simmons' gates. He would do very creative ornamental iron gates, and that's one of the images that was taken from one of his gates.
And on this same road trip, I got to visit with Mary Jane. She was a seagrass basket weaver, and 30 years later, I can remember the temperature of the day and the humidity. And then I remember the ice cream truck coming by, and we had an opportunity, because we do sometimes, a lot of the neighbors come out and the kids come out, wonder what we're doing. We were shooting on the porch, and when the ice cream truck came by, Michael went down and bought everybody ice cream. And we just had a great day. And this is probably one of my most favorite photographs. What a beautiful woman. But this was the beginning, and so she was the third person I ever photographed. And then we went into the hills, and this is Ray Hicks. Very interesting character, let's say. Coming from New York, I was really out of my element, but I think maybe one of the great things was that everything was so new to me and so fresh that every part of my visit with each one of these fellows was just so exciting. I was excited when I went into his house, and the only electricity was a wire with a pigtail and a bulb, and that was great. I was excited about that. We sat out on his porch for hours, and we recorded him telling tales of the hills and tales of Jack.
Yeah, the tales he tells are often called Jack tales. And probably a lot of you know Jack and the Beanstalk. That's a Jack tale. There are lots of stories about this figure named Jack. And some of them involve giants. And I have to tell you that Ray Hicks was a giant of a man. I don't know, he must have been close to 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
I don't know. He was an incredible storyteller. He was just, he would transfix you with his stories.
And we're still trying to understand every word of those stories.
Yeah.
You know, he would get into talking, you might not understand it, but he would laugh at it too. So we knew it was funny when he was laughing at his own story. And what a great visit. But it was really interesting when, so coming from the Northeast, and here we are in this area, we couldn't find him. So we stopped at a post office. And the gentleman says, well, you go up about 3 miles, you come to the fork in the road, and you go down to the left, you go into the valley, and you'll find Ray Hicks. Well, we did all that. It was perfect. The first house we came upon, it said Hicks on the mailbox. We went up and knocked on the door, and then backed off because the dogs were barking. And the woman comes to the door, she says, can I help you? I says, I'm looking for Ray Hicks. Well, he don't live here. Where does he live? Down the road. Well, there were a large majority of those mailboxes all with the name Hicks on it. So it took us a while to get to them, but we did. And we spent a wonderful day. And, is just, once again, the beginning of the evolution of what we were doing. And to round out the first trip, we ended up back in Fairfax, Fairfax Station, Virginia, with John, and once again another memorable moment. The area where John grew up, there were a lot of the Civil War battles. So when we came in the house, there was all the Civil War memorabilia findings and so on. It was like a treasure trove, and I was grateful enough for you to give me a couple of gifts. But Barry, you could elaborate on that.
It's one of the things. He was a guitar player and singer, wonderful person, and he was. But by profession, he was a grave digger, and he dug graves. But his pastime was to go out into the battlefields in Virginia and to use a metal detector and to find all these relics from the Civil War. And I always thought it was interesting, those two professions melding, where in one case he's putting people under the ground or assisting in it, and in the other case he's trying to unearth treasures from under the ground. And I always thought that was an interesting juxtaposition in his career.
So I spent an afternoon with John, and I don't know if it was the setting, his living room, just nothing was working out. So we both agreed for me to come back the next day. So we packed up the cameras, put everything back in the car. I walked back up to the house to say goodbye to him, and as he opened the door, the sunlight just hit his face, and I called out for Michael to bring up the camera to me, and I took 6 exposures, and I knew I had it, and this is once again one of my favorite, and maybe it is because it was my first trip, but I hold all these so dear to my heart. A few months later, this is my second trip down to the bayou in Louisiana, and there I was when I started photographing Irvin, and not far from his home, and I thought it was kind of interesting asking him, what are these gentlemen going out fishing for? He goes, alligators. Once again, from New York, out of my realm. I can see if he said a squirrel or rat maybe. But, and so we got to experience that, and then a couple of days later, I went to visit with Ken Ray Fontenot, and we were treated to a magnificent meal by his wife. And what I loved about that meal, that we were participants in it, because right after we finished photographing, we went and sat inside, and he says, oh no, can you gentlemen go outside, and there's all these crawdad holes. He goes, if you didn't get them deep enough, you get them out of there. We did. That was our dinner. So they're just not photographing adventures there. They take on a life of their own. I haven't put my hand in a crawdad hole, so just to let you know. And,
they're hard to find in New York.
Yeah, they're definitely hard to find in New York. And all I could think about, because my older brother was a lobsterman, I was like, no, this is not really going to be good. Only that I knew they were that big, that maybe they'll take a finger. So, but once again, memorable trips, and yeah, it's so unique. Each person, even though they might be in the same parish or parishes next to each other, they all had such wonderful personalities and so welcoming to allow us into their lives, and that I'm grateful for. And here was my first venture out to the West Coast, to Los Angeles, and this tea house is her husband built a replica of a tea house that she had in her home country. And when I arrived, I was working with a granddaughter, who was my translator. And when I arrived, there were many students, all dressed up as she is, there to witness my visit. And we would stand around the floor, and they would perform ceremonies so I'd be able to record it. And at the end, they asked me to join in. Well, if you ever tried to sit down with the top of your foot flat on the ground, it's an impossibility. I lasted about 2 seconds, screamed in pain. But once again, it's how they think of my visits as I'm thinking of it. So she had a big lunch set for us. So we all sit down at the table. There were people standing. And I said to her granddaughter, thinking that we're going to have our traditional Japanese, dinner. I said, so what would you serve at an event like this? And she goes, my grandmother asked, what is someone from New York eat? And she served pastrami sandwich.
She was very much revered in both the United States and in Japan, and in fact she did conduct a tea ceremony at the close of World War II at one of the treaty signings. And when she came to Washington for the Heritage Fellowships, she was asked by the Embassy of Japan to conduct a tea ceremony during her visit, and that was a very special occasion to go to the embassy and experience the ceremony. It's an amazing ritual, and it's something you could only hope to experience once in your lifetime.
Right, and that's how I feel. I'm grateful for that visit. Well, this is another special moment. Well, they're all special in this way. But when I went out to Oklahoma to visit with Vanessa, well, I learned Oklahoma's flat, and we going through her archives with her. As I say, we spent many hours before we even got to this point. She has such great artifacts in her home, and pictures of headdresses or her grandfathers at ceremonies in Washington side of peace treaties with these incredible headdresses. And I just happened to say, so where are they? And she's had them. Trying to figure out where to photograph her. Her husband and Vanessa said, follow me, and brought me down into their earthen hut. This earthen structure was a vision that she had rebuilt from when she was a little girl that her grandfather had. And so we decided to do it in there, even though it was kind of dimly lit. It just seemed like a real natural place. Well, her husband had the sense to go out and pick up like evergreen bushes, just because they make a lot of smoke. And with the beautiful sunlight coming in through the vent in the top of this structure, it picked up the light beams and just added to the mystique of the whole photograph. Now, all those headdresses were the ones that I had seen in the ceremony photos in her home. And there was one that was dated around 1910 for the ceremonial spears, so I was able to put a date to it. The feathers that she's holding were a gift from her godmother at 12 with the robe, and it was just such a natural photograph for her, and I'm very proud of this one.
The craft, I mean, we honor the craft, and it's important. She makes now the ceremonial craft work, but one of the very important things is she's interested in the coming of age ceremonies of the younger girls when they become women. And so she's a real educator with the younger girls in the Kiowa community, because she is the person who carries it on. Without the ceremonial objects, you can't have the rituals, and without the rituals, you can't have the retention of the knowledge that comes with the ceremony and with the language.
Right, which goes back to those feathers, particular to their tribe. And this is just one of the, it was just a moment on another visit where we were in the backyard and Etta was playing her guitar, and we would, sometimes I just sit and listen. I don't always have to have the camera running. And we walked inside, it was a warm day, went inside to this sort of office library area, and she picked up her banjo, and she just started talking about it. And she got so deep in thought, and I took this photograph because it's just such a special moment that really showed me and shows her personality to me. And then you just sort of know you have it. I don't think we photographed after this. And here's one of the stories that will just change your life at times. So Flory, she grew up in Europe, and during World War II, she had to flee her country and made it safely to America. Her father put her on the train with an accordion and said, if any of the soldiers ask you who you about your background, just play the instrument. And she did. She made it to America. Her family perished. So I'm sitting in a home with her, and she's a terrific musician, and she's telling me this story. And I asked her, whatever happened to that accordion that helped you get to be a free person? And she said, it's in my closet. Nobody had ever asked her where it was. So we took it out, and it's in the photograph. And since then...
Yes, it wasn't playable at that point. It had not been used for some time, but thanks to an apprenticeship program, there was a person who did instrument repair, the Virginia program, in this case funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. We were able to have the accordion repaired, so it's now playable again. She could play her accordion.
So that was a special moment to be able to take it out of her closet and then present it within the photograph. And this is a day that probably the day I felt the worst for a moment, and then it got a lot better. Barry and I went up to Michigan to present. Barry was presenting the gentleman, Wade Boehner, a plaque for his 100th birthday.
It was his 100th birthday party. Yeah, we were taking a plaque and a letter from the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts celebrating the occasion.
So that afternoon, both him and his wife gave a concert at the local high school auditorium, and you can see from this photograph, it was overflowing. Of course, I couldn't just be in the audience. I was on the side of the stage and back of the stage taking pictures when, at one point, Wade asked me to come out to introduce me to the audience. And because I'm so shy, I tried to put him off, but he wouldn't go on playing until I came out. So he introduced me to the audience. Barry was sitting a couple rows in front, and all of a sudden somebody stood up in the audience and screamed out, "Sit down." And I looked at Barry. I felt the blood leave in my head. And then somebody else stood up and screamed out, "Sit down." And I said, I need to leave. You need to perform. And I went off stage and I immediately walked out. And because I didn't mean to upset, the concert they were giving. So Barry came out and met me in the courtyard.
Well, I had to explain to Tom that one of the songs Wade and Julia Main are most known for is a song called "Sit Down." And, it's a gospel song. She says, "Sit down," and he says, "I can't sit down." She says, "Sit down." He says, "I can't sit down. I just got to heaven and I got to walk around." And so they were calling for that song, but Tom wasn't in on the.
I did recover from that, but I mean, once again, I look back at it now. I'm glad I can talk about it and stay seated at the same time. So one of those great moments that happen throughout our visits.
It's something you wouldn't expect to find in Dearborn, Michigan necessarily. It's a North Carolina family that, as with many migrants to the north, went to Dearborn for the auto industry, and but Wade and many of the other J.E. Maynor, his brother, were both really well-known string band musicians in North Carolina, playing old-time music. They played on the radio and issued 78s way back, but here he was living in Dearborn, Michigan, and very much appreciated there, as you can see, as well.
And this photograph of Chunky Sanchez is another one of those moments. About a week after he received his Heritage Fellow, I flew out to San Diego to visit with him and his family. I worked it out with his family that I'd come, and I asked them, where do you think he would like to be photographed? And if you haven't been out in that area, there's a place called Chicano Park. And it's underneath these crossing highways. And the stanchions are just covered in graffiti. Really the flavor of the neighborhood, telling you about the people. And they're beautiful. So I knew exactly where it was. So I arrived at the park early. It was, and I'm about an hour early. And while I was waiting, these cars started pulling up, and these folks would get out, and then the trunk would open, and they started dressing up in costumes. So I went over. Of course, I couldn't sit there, and I had to know what was going on. They said, I thought maybe a parade. And they said, no, they were coming to honor a friend of theirs, somebody that has supported them in their struggles over the years. And that gentleman was Chunky Sanchez, for his advocacy to migrant farm workers, to the community. And so when he arrived with his family, I could do none of it but ask everybody to be in his photograph. And this is how they came to honor him.
Chicano Park is, in fact, Chunky was an advocate who worked with the farm workers through the years and performed at many of the farm worker gatherings. And the issue with Chicano Park actually was it was a neighborhood park, and they were going to build this highway through and pretty much destroy the neighborhood and the little park that was there. And there were quite a few protests about it. And in the end, they did elevate the highway, I think, so that it still connects the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
But they have put up all these murals honoring various members of the community, and Chunky's portrait is a part of one of the murals.
And also, also in the local school,
Yeah.
they've named it and have done this. But you can see up here some of the graffiti, you know. But for these folks to come out to honor him is quite something, what it said for the man. And here we are in Texas. You might recognize these two brothers, Flaco and Santiago Jimenez. And it shows that sometimes it's one member of a family or a few members of a community that keep their traditions alive, bring it forth. And here it is, two brothers that learn from their father. And they both, Flaco was a Grammy Award winner as well, and he wanted to be photographed in the Mission in San Antonio, and his brother, this is his home and studio area, but back
In fact, there have been a number of accordion players, conjunto, Tex-Mex accordion players from Texas honored through the years, and this is one example. Some of you may be familiar with an organization called Texas Folklife Resources, which does a lot of great work here in Texas, based in Austin, and they do a program each year, Accordion Kings and Queens. They honor the best accordion players in the region, but it's quite a deep tradition in Texas, as you well know.
there was a moment when I was with Flaco, and they, one of the groups that he's educated a lot. There was a young man playing an accordion in the group, and he wasn't doing. He thought he was doing well, but he said to Flaco, "I don't know, this accordion can't do certain things." And Flaco said, "I'll show you how it's done." And for like the next 10 minutes, the whole band just stopped to watch him. He schooled everybody, and it was a great tribute to his skills. So, but this is great. Did you want to talk about your first encounter in Santiago?
Well, way back, I was doing a festival in Missouri, in St. Louis, and we wanted to book their father, Santiago Jimenez Sr. He's Santiago Jimenez Jr. And so I called out, and I was talking to Santiago Jr. I thought I was talking to Santiago Sr., but I invited Santiago Jr. to the festival, and he came, and he did a great job. But little did I know, I didn't know at the time. I asked for Santiago Jimenez. Yep, sure enough, it was Santiago Jimenez. But they both carried on the tradition of their father quite well through the years.
Right, and Santiago actually, between the two brothers, has really dedicated the past 10 years to getting all the recordings, whether they're reel to reel, everything that his father had taught them when they were younger. So he has really worked hard to do that. And here are 4 more Texas fellows. You'd start up on the top left. That's Joel Nelson. He's a cowboy poet. And we had the opportunity to ride with Joel, my youngest daughter Eliza and I. At the time, we rode for several days with Joel and his wife. And the first thing you learn is horse etiquette. So the first day out, here I am on top of a horse with a camera trying to take a picture of a man on a horse moving, and I would stop and we'd get out the laptop and we'd look at the pictures, and I thought they looked beautiful. And he goes, "The horse is not paying attention." So I learned horse etiquette. And he taught me the horse will respond to you, and you know when it's paying attention, when its ears are facing forward, acknowledging what you're saying. Well, it took me a while for them to acknowledge me. But Must be that New York accent.
Probably did, yeah.
But one thing that Joel did teach me, and this is with all the fellows, when you listen to them, it helps create their image, the portrait that I like to do. He said something, and he talked about that out on the range, your horse is your best friend. And there was a moment where we went into the corral, and I don't know if we were ready to water the horses or something, and we have these two crazy bulls in the back fighting, and he said if they come up to you, just push them out of the way. Yeah, right. But here they go, and he's just hanging out, and he just naturally put his arm around his horse as if it was his best friend. And we got this photograph, and you just know it all came together. But that was part of listening and understanding. If he never said that to me, I might never notice that moment. So I was grateful for that. So it's a learning experience all along. There's in the upper left, Veronica from San Antonio. There's a piece of her work outside, a piece of pottery that she had done on the missions. And I visited with her several times. Every time I try to, if I'm in the town, in the city, in the neighborhood, I always call the fellow just to say hello, and if they're willing for me to stop by and say hello again, and maybe have lunch together. So there was a building that at the time was run down and abandoned, and with some grants and stuff, they gave it to Veronica and her family to build a community art center. I was there the first day as the roof was leaking and there was sewage and all kinds of stuff. And after my third visit, it's a wonderful running neighborhood art center. And this was the new piece that she had just done. If you notice, when you came in, there's a quilt hanging up. And that quilt is done by Laverne Bracken. And what I love about this photograph, not knowing at the time, that the quilt that I asked her to hold would be gifted to my daughter at the end of the photo shoot. And there it is. We did get permission to bring it. But a special moment, special lady, wonderful, wonderful quilts. And you can see there were many of them there. And why this one? We let her select the quilt that she wanted to show. Once again, letting them teach us about what they do. And the quilt was used as on a bed. It was, it was a usable quilt. It wasn't just something that was hung up or put away. And here we have Cowboy Donnelly from Austin, and he's recognized for his music. And once again, his daughter helped us find this location, and there's a small stage behind where local musicians were always welcome and still are welcome to come and play. But it's just part of our travels through the wonderful state of Texas.
Did you ever play the Skyline Club, Barbara? Did you ever play in the Skyline Club?
Sir?
Yeah.
Did you
play in the Skyline Club?
In Austin?
In Austin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You did. So there's the neon sign from the club. Yeah. So there's the Skyline neon sign that this establishment had purchased. So you played in the Skyline Club.
Yeah. Yes.
I know what I'm recording next. That story. That's going to be a great one. Now, if I could only get that sign down here by tomorrow, we'd be in great shape.
Yeah, there you go.
So you could give us some background on the history, because mine might be more interesting. So these are things that come out of. I've photographed Veronica a number of times. And this one, when she was carrying out this latest sculpture, it's so beautiful. And then the way the light just shined upon her. I just asked her to stop. We took a few photos, and you just have that instinct that you know you have it at the time. And I'm grateful that all of these, each one of these visits were just such a different experience, but leaves a mark on you, and hopefully we leave them with something as well. Part of a conference that Barry was on a panel back in about 2009, there was a gentleman named Joe Wilson, and a great educator to me on different cultures, music, especially down in Virginia. He had headed up the NCTA, the National Council for Traditional Arts, for quite a number of years. But during that panel talk, it came out that he talked about the first musician he visited with, or a musician he visited with in Florida, who made their first guitar out of the wires from the screen door in a cigar box. He had documented that. And I left there, knowing all of them for many years, that I had to rededicate myself. That was what I was doing. Was it enough? Was I walking away with enough information to hold their legacy, their heritage, and to pass on? And so these are photographs of different objects that all the fellows have created. Now, this gentleman up here holding the book, he's not a Heritage Fellow, but he is the one that wrote this book with a Heritage Fellow, Molly Parker, documenting the Passamaquoddy language. Most tribes have lost the language of how it was written. You can see the sign that it's a Bible. And so that's how that ended up there. But these are all pieces that just as important as the artist is that we and bring forth. The young lady, Teresa Secord, who's a basket weaver, this piece all the way over here, while I was photographing her, we were photographing her tools. I was busy with her, and my friend Michael, who's been with me for forever and ever doing this, and I'm grateful to him for always getting me everywhere I need to be. He put this, we have black cloths and the lights, and he said, come over here, take a look at this on the screen. And this face appeared. And we asked Teresa to come over, and we showed it to her. That was from her grandmother to her mother to her. She had never known that image was carved into that. And now, instead of just being a tool, now it's something even more special, sacred to her. So we're glad to find that. There's this piece up here by George Blake. He makes red canoes out of redwood trees. And I did ride with him in one of the canoes, and when you're in there are outcroppings, and there is a life being in that canoe. There are kidneys, there are designs of the lungs and the head of the boat. They created a lot out of this boat. And here was a small replica in his workshop that was sort of in several different pieces. And I told him how important his work was. And at that moment, he didn't think much of it. And I don't know how many times I must have told him that was such a special piece. The next morning when I came to visit, the first thing he wanted to show me, instead of all night, putting it back together. And so these are the things. This is a basket by Evelina Henry from the Apache tribe. And Brown, the
Jerry Brand.
Jerry Brown on the pottery. I asked Jerry, like, why would anybody want to buy and drink out of that jug? I mean, you know, it's pretty scary, but one of the reasons, and you probably know just better than I, but, you know, back when the jugs were made, we always seen them with like XXX or whatever. There were meanings to that, and if somebody couldn't read, they would know if they seen a jug like this, that whatever was in there, do not drink. Right?
Yeah, there's a tradition of the face jugs of
Right.
different sorts.
Right. Yeah, so,
Mhm.
you know, and there might be other horror stories beyond that, but, so this was a rededication, so whenever I go and visit with a fellow, if they're a crafts person, I make sure I spend extra time. My visits used to be a day, and now I extend them at a minimum of 2 days, and if I need to, I push it before I leave to a third morning. This is Terry Rothko. In the book, she appears 3 times. When I first met her in 2009, I don't know what it was, but the soul of this woman came into my soul. She was so special. She made these, you know,
Ravensdale blankets or
right,
robes.
that she would, robes that, you know, she would wrap around, but she had this particular way that she would twist her body. The first time I seen it was during the concert in Washington, that when she twisted her body, she twirled, it would just open up so you could see the whole design. The significance of this piece is that she researched the goats that she would make this from the wool to this fabric, from 100-year-old robes from her ancestors. And she found that group of goats living in the mountains. They wouldn't share the goats. They wait till they shed. And friends and family, if they were walking a trail and seen they would collect it for her. So it took many years. But she incorporated the DNA of that herd that they have been using for hundreds of years. And also at different times of the year, these boxes, they would collect the berries that were ripening. And so she sewed all this, you know, she quilted all this into her robe, and went up to visit with Terry in Sitka, and I had just learned that she wasn't well. But she wanted me to come up. She wanted me to spend time with her. And the first morning we go out, she took me to an area down in the marsh where she'd like to be photographed. And there were bear tracks. And the bear tracks were still filling up with water, which meant it just passed by. And that sort of unnerved me a little bit. But they were pretty calm about it. Now, you have to realize, at this moment, Terry's on crutches, because she is dying of bone cancer, so she was in really bad health. But she wanted me to document and record her work for the future. So anyway, we're at this first location, and I really am having a hard time getting it together, thinking about this bear. So her husband, Denny, turned around and said, "Tom, you don't have to worry about any of that." I says, "You know, Denny, I'm the one under the cover. By the time I see him, he might be under the cover with me." I said, "Listen, I've heard about rolling, holding your head. If you can't climb a tree, they climb better than us." I says, "What do we do?" He goes, "All you have to know is that you have to know that you could outrun the person you're with." And we both looked at Terry, and she picked up her card. She says, "Guys, that's unfair." And it's like, okay, I'm good with this. But we went down to this other area, and I was really concerned. In our conversation, I was like, boy, we were talking about how she did it, and she wanted to do this. And while I was photographing that, I asked Denny to put his head right on my shoulder so I could talk to him, and he could tell me exactly what was going on with Terry and how she felt, and to keep going on until finally I stopped. But she did. She wanted this to be taken, and it's one of my favorite photographs ever. At the moment, and spending some of the last days with Terry. Just a great lady. So you can read about her in the book. It was. This was really a great trip. This gentleman, Elder Roma Wilson, come from Mississippi, migrated to Chicago with the great migration of musicians. And I could not find him for a long time. So one night, or early in the morning, about 3 o'clock, I was researching another Heritage Fellow when I found a YouTube post of this gentleman playing his harmonica. But it said 2014, and we were only in 16. I'm like, I opened the books, I did all the math, and I rechecked my math, and I was like, it's impossible. He'd be 106 years old. But before I went to sleep, I sent some notes to colleagues of us up in Michigan, and by Sunday night, I got a response that they knew where this gentleman was. He was alive and well in Detroit, Michigan. By Monday, I was talking to his granddaughter. By Monday night, I was on my way to Detroit. Michael was on vacation. He asked if I could wait till Friday. I said, at 106, I'm not taking any chance. So I went out. So I met with his family. I was introduced to his son, who is the pastor of the congregation now. He's only 75. That's his granddaughter. And he hadn't played his harmonicas in a while. She brought them out, and he started testing different ones. And this moment just happened. I'm so glad, so glad always. I'm so glad, troubles don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
All right. I'm so glad trouble don't last always.
There was a great recording of Elder Roma Wilson with 3 of his sons are all playing harmonica. They do a song called This Train. It was recorded in the 1950s, but I think you can probably track it down. So it was a very rare recording, but I think it's probably somewhere on on the internet by now. But it's a spectacular recording of that song. Harmonica playing is just unbelievable.
One of the nice things is when I did come to visit with him, he had introduced me to his recently new bride. And I was in the kitchen with her, chatting about something, and I walk out, and he grabbed me. He goes, "So what do you think?" I said, "She's lovely." He goes, "I really brought the cradle on this one." So he had a great sense of humor. So And we spent the day, and these are the things, these are the wonderful things that happen to us. And I'm glad I didn't wait till Friday. He did last. Past my visit. So this is Bobby Fulcher, and he is the park manager and created the Cumberland Trail
Sure.
for about the past 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a perfect example how I asked the fellow, where would you like to be photographed? And what would you like to, how would you like to dress? Well, he wanted to wear his uniform. And unfortunately with Bobby, he has more energy than me, that he had 300 places he would like to show us. The top one photograph was taken by Michael. We walked down probably forever with a lot of equipment, and then Bobby says, well, I'd like to be photographed up there. So because it was, well, to me, dangerous, but to him, he was like a mountain goat. He was up there quicker, and there was like this little stream of water coming between him and I'm like, I am not crossing that stream of water, because if I slip, there's another 100 feet. So this was a great example of me listening to the fellow and going there, and it turned out in the presentation when he came in, his portrait, the actual portrait was in there. And then on day 3, he wanted to show us this new walkway he just created, and we got up there for sunset, and he built it over these outcroppings, and there's about 20, 30 feet in between each one, and maybe 150 feet. You can tell by the tree line, we're way above the trees. And it hadn't even opened to the public, and he brought us up there. And so this is a great visual to show that how we, just really get involved with the fellow. And these are just, just really nice moments of portraits that during my visit, and it goes from crafts to music, from West Virginia, and she could be everybody's grandma.
It's a great, beautiful basket. It kind of reminds me of a story when with the National Heritage Fellowships, we're really able to draw attention to people. Some people joke about basket weaving as being, just a hobby or something, but it's really a whole lot more than that, and a whole lot more complicated. There was a basket weaver who lived about 12 miles down the road from where I grew up in Missouri, in rural Missouri, and he had a garage where he would sit out front and weave baskets, and he had a sign up saying baskets, and people, it was right along the road, so people would pull off and buy a basket from him every now and then. And one day I noticed when I drove by that he changed the sign to folk art, and rather than baskets, and so he was interviewed by one of the local newspaper people sometime after that, and they asked him the question. They said, well, what is the difference between folk art and baskets? And he must have thought about it for a little bit, and he said, well, he says, I don't really know, but it seems to be about $50 a basket. So the way you frame things and the way you think about them makes a difference, and that is sort of what the Heritage Fellowships do, I think, is that draw attention to the importance of some of these very localized traditions that may not be known outside their own communities sometimes.
Right, I agree. And the same thing for their music. They might be well known within their community, but the National Heritage Fellow being recognized as one brings them to the rest of the country, and that's what's so nice. And I try to do each one of them proud when I leave, and visit with John Morris, just in his countryside. You just arrive and you look at the beauty surrounding it. And there was this brook that ran beside his home. Just the sound of the water, even with the recordings we did with him playing, you could hear the water just rolling over the stones. And, it's really, really unique moment. And once again, from crafts to music to bringing forth heritage, here we got to spend time to learn about the Crow Nation and their heritage and stories that Grant had told within the hills, and we went deep within the reservation, and we started noticing small piles of stone, and then as we went deeper, some of them were 5-6 feet high, and we asked him, what are these, religious? And he went on to tell the story. Now, when he told the story, it was about 20 minutes per story, so, but there's this, like, worm-like creature, which called worm, would come out of the earth. And in a particular ceremony, you would give all your troubles and illnesses to this mythical beast, and it would go back into the earth. And then you would take a stone and you would put it on top of that hole, so that it would never come back to you. And you just follow these, and in the middle of nowhere, you follow trails, and then, so this continues to this day. Folks, in the community follow these beliefs and will go out and form these little, they start out little and they get really big. This is one of the newest pieces that I just did. We waited till we were allowed to visit with folks again after the pandemic. And this was in Winsboro, Louisiana. I took this Easter Eve. These ladies perform a ceremony that dates back several hundred years, and it's performed on Easter Eve, and it's basically the tradition of from Good Friday to Holy Saturday to the resurrection. And in this church is on its original plantation. It's been moved, but the plantation it's on is still owned by the same family, and they're allowed to use the church and continue running the church as long as there's a pastor. But the sound of them going around the table that they have brought offerings to, with a symbol that could look like a cross or the procession, but in this old church, it's the floorboards and the stomping that really vibrate through the congregation and bring excitement to it. And they're one of the, if not the last, group of folks that continue this slave tradition. And we're really happy that you can see in this photograph these are the grandchildren and that are bringing forth this tradition as well. Two, a very famous lady.
There we go. There she is.
So this is Barbara Lynn. I think she lives somewhere in Beaumont. And this was Barbara performing during her concert.
The Heritage Concert,
Yep.
right?
And so we get to honor her once again. I can't thank you enough for being here, but to be exposed to her music and have the hall in Washington listen to her playing is just beyond amazing. And
She probably messes up a lot of photographers' playing that guitar left-handed because they might think the photo's backwards. Or
I could always.
one of the few left-handed guitar players.
That's right,
like I said.
that's right. Well, I remember that in rehearsal, from what angle was I gonna shoot the photographs from, because if I was too far this way, I wouldn't see the face of it. If I was too far this way, I really was blocked by other people, so you did pose a challenge, we worked it out. And one of the photographs that I really enjoyed from that night, just happened to work out because Barbara's so shy, is this last one.
And that guy, excuse me, that guy made that big guitar for me too. He's out of Hollywood.
Oh, is that
Really? Wow. Custom-made guitar.
Yeah.
Well, we started with Barbara Lynn, we ended with her. There she is, taking her bow with all the other Heritage Fellows. I think, I don't know how much time we have. We might have run pretty late here, but we'd be happy to take a couple questions if we have time.
I just have to add in, well, so the story doesn't end here for Barbara or myself, because now I have the great honor to visit with her and do her portrait while I'm here. So I'm grateful for that. So thank you, Barbara. And thanks to your daughter for making all this happen for us.
Yes,
Where
sir.
was Cumberland Park at? What state was it?
It's East Tennessee. East Tennessee, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
You're
you
the
go
Cumberland
to
Gap.
Knoxville. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Yes.
I'm curious how the National Endowment finds these artists, especially with the
Mhm.
standardized art world, and kind of how the application process happens and how they are connected with your institution.
Okay, so we'll repeat the question. The question was, how does the National Endowment for the Arts find these artists? Well, there's a network of folk arts coordinators around the country, mainly based at state arts agencies, not always, but anyone can nominate someone for this award. So the endowment receives nominations from across the country, from a variety of people, and then we convene a panel that selects the artist for any given year. It's varied in number. Usually now it's 9. At one time it was 12. Artists each year are selected. But it's really a network of people who are knowledgeable about the field, who make the nominations. But anyone can make that nomination. So you can go online to the NEA website and make there are instructions there for how to nominate people. So we really encourage that. Yeah.
And how do you photograph now?
What you mean from film to digital?
Yeah, are you doing mostly all digital now?
Yes, I
Everything?
am. I am, but the process is pretty much the same. I don't come to visit with one of the fellows and say, well, let's try it here. I don't take hundreds of photos. We sit, I listen, we talk. As I said, sometimes it might be hours before I even open the camera bag. By then I have a good idea of how the fellow wants to be portrayed. And I pretty much know what I have. Like some of the shots, 5, 6 exposures, that was with film, and that was it. So to leave and drive, all the way to the south, shoot somebody with 6 exposures in film without knowing it, and just have to trust in yourself. There was an interesting thing. We had done a talk down at Duke University, and I talked to their students. There was a folklore, was it their master class?
Folklore program, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the teacher to take a piece of have every student take a piece of tape and tape the back of their camera, so when they took a picture, they wouldn't know what it looked like. And there was a lot of balking at that by the students, because number one, they might not be really great at camera work. So one of the kids said to me, well, how do I know if the exposure is good? So I said, well, then you have to learn how to work the camera. But I think at the end of the program, when I seen some of the work they produced, it was really, really good. So it made them think about, like, just don't go 200 shots. Think about that one photograph. And hopefully it
Of course, those students also asked Tom how he photoshopped in those deer in the background of that cover photo.
That was their first question. So when you did that picture, how did you know where to put the deer and how many to put in there? They couldn't conceive that that was possible.
Where is Winsboro, Louisiana located?
About 3 to 4 hours northeast, just a little bit. Yeah, it's not that far from here.
Oh, okay, I mean, what city in Louisiana? Is
Close
it
to
Winsboro.
Lafayette or something?
another city in Louisiana?
It's Winsboro, right? Is that
Mhm.
what you
I think so.
Oh, Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's the name of the town.
Yeah, it's north of Jackson,
Yeah, so
right north. Is that what you,
West, isn't it?
well,
What on the map?
pretty close to it, because we were gonna come down to Jackson and visit with Barbara, but we decided, Michael and I decided to go home and visit with our family on Easter night. Our wives,
And you said it was about an hour from Jackson, Mississippi?
that might be too, I don't
Lisa
really
has
know,
a
but,
ballpark house, yeah.
it's a wonderful place.
Mhm.
Good, good eats, good for that.
I want to know of the fellows, say there are 9 now. Do you try to do all 9 of them? How do you select?
Who I visit? I don't. You could, so you could get one this year, and I might not see you for 5 years. I don't know. And I have left that up to a lot of times where I'm traveling, but I left that up to when I visit with them. That's the moment I'm supposed to be there. I don't know why. With Elder Rollo Wilson, I was looking for him for well 15 years. So when I made that connection, that's why I jumped right on that play. With Chunky Sanchez, his health, he was brought to Washington. His family went to the hospital that morning. It was a call. Are you able to get up and come? And they did. They put him on a plane. But I personally, after spending time with him, I didn't know how bad his health was, so I flew out. I think it was there that following Friday. But for the most part, it's just, which part of the country do I want to spend time that I haven't covered in a while? And so this summer, Michael and I spent majority of our time in the Midwest, in Ohio, and Chicago area, and Wisconsin. Visiting with fellows from different ages, and visiting with friends of fellows that you can't go through certain towns without stopping and having a cup of tea with someone like Liz Carroll.
Did you say he was 106?
Yes.
He surely didn't look it.
I'll tell you, that night I was doing math, and I'm not the greatest mathematician. I'm like, this can't be true. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
The
Wonderful
reason
sense of humor. Yeah.
the reason for me going the next day.
Right.
Well, we thank you all so much for coming out, and I'll turn it over to Tony, but we're happy to stick around and sign some books if you're interested and chat informally. But thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thank you.
I mentioned that I was fortunate to be at the NEA 2 times, the first time for 8 years in 2003, and then the second time for 4 years in 2017. I always have a hard time describing the experience and what joy it was to work there, and it's getting to work with people like Barry and Tom, and it's, you've got to see it, you can't describe it, and I'm glad y'all got to see a piece of the great work that's done by people like Barry and Tom. Thank you all so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Barbara, thank you for coming in. I appreciate you as well. And we'll see you hopefully in our next lecture.
Thank you very much for coming.